Coming up on this Friday edition of Daybreak, ending weeks of speculation, Korea says it's seeking to join the China-backed Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, despite US opposition to the new multinational lender. Officials say the co-pilot of the plane that smashed into the French Alps, named as Andreas Lubitz, appears to have crashed the Germanwings Airbus A320 on purpose. Plus, North Korea claims to have arrested 2 spies who work for South Korea's National Intelligence Service. Seoul says it's looking into the matter. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Friday, March 27th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning: after weeks of will it or won't it, South Korea finally announced late Thursday that it does intend to join a new China-led regional development bank as a founding member. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is expected to shake up the existing world financial order by emerging as a rival to US and Japanese-led infrastructure banks. Our Song Ji-sun starts us off.
As widely expected, Seoul submitted its application to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank ahead of Tuesday's deadline. The South Korean government said it sent a letter to Beijing seeking to become a founding member, adding the decision was made with the country's best interests in mind. Korea was widely anticipated to join, following behind European members like the UK and France, and 21 other nations that already signed up last year. AIIB is the first multilateral financial institution that Korea joins as a founding member. While Washington has been expressing concerns over Beijing's governance and influence in the new development fund, participating in the AIIB is likely to benefit Seoul, as Korean companies will also be able to take part in AIIB-funded infrastructure projects. China is key to chip in as much as $50 billion in initial capital, with other members expected to make donations to start the fund at more than $100 billion. The focus now is securing voting rights, which will directly impact Korea's role in China-led bank. A major factor in calculating the stakes will be the member nation's GDP. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea claims to have arrested 2 South Korean spies who it says worked for Seoul's National Intelligence Service from the Chinese border city of Dandong. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency reported late Thursday that the men, identified as Kim Guk-gi and Che Chung-gil, are being held on charges related to terrorism and bringing in large quantities of counterfeit money. It added that Che was arrested last December, while Kim was captured in Pyongyang in September. The South's Unification Ministry says it's looking into the claims. A memorial ceremony took place in the central city of Daejeon on Thursday to mark the 5th anniversary of North Korea's deadly torpedo attack on the South Korean warship Cheonan. And marking the occasion, South Korea has vowed to get North Korea to take responsibility for the attack when stalled inter-Korean talks resume. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Thursday that it plans to talk to Pyongyang about possible ways to do that, including discussions on sanctions placed on the regime following the sinking. While North Korea continues to deny its involvement, Washington also lent support to the South Korean government's stance. The State Department reportedly reaffirmed its backing of an investigative report by South Korean and international experts that blames North Korea for the sinking. The top US military officer will hold security-related talks with his South Korean counterpart in Seoul later today. General Martin Dempsey's trip comes amid the heated controversy over the possible deployment of the THAAD missile defense system in South Korea. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Will the top U.S. military officer address the possible deployment of a controversial U.S. missile defense system in South Korea during his visit to Seoul? U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Martin Dempsey and his counterpart Geunhye will meet on Friday to discuss pending issues, such as responding to North Korean threats. The South Korean military stressed that the deployment of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Battery, also known as THAAD, is not on the agenda. Although the two allies say there have been no formal discussions, Washington has been pushing the issue, saying THAAD will deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Seoul is more cautious, with its neighbors, namely China and Russia, voicing their opposition. South Korean ambassador to the U.S., An Ho-young, on Thursday said the decision will be based on Korea's needs.
As we are doing with the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, we will consider various factors and reach a decision that best serves our national interest at an appropriate time.
North Korea has expressed anger about the proposed defense system, with its foreign ministry warning that the deployment will turn the region into a theater of fierce scramble. In a statement carried by North Korean state media on Thursday, the ministry called it Washington's preparation for a preemptive strike at the north and an attempt to contain China and Russia. Even if the issue of THAAD doesn't come up this time, pundits say speculation will resurface when U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter visits South Korea early next month. 황성희, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, visiting U.S. Army Chief Martin Dempsey met with President Park Geunhye at her office on Thursday, where the South Korean leader said winning by deterrence is the best kind of victory. After conferring Dempsey the Order of National Security Merit's highest order, the president said the Seoul-Washington alliance is the best of its kind in the world and is expanding to address global concerns. Dempsey said it will also play a vital role in unification matters on the Korean Peninsula. He also delivered regards from US President Barack Obama and expressed anticipation for the Korean president's visit to Washington in the near future. An unidentified man tried to set fire to the Korean Cultural Center in Tokyo on Wednesday night local time. Fortunately, no one was hurt and the property wasn't damaged except for the stone wall near the side entrance, which was blackened by the flames. As you can see there, the CCTV footage shows the unidentified man pouring lighter fluid on the wall and setting it on fire. Now, the motive for the crime remains unknown at this point, but the Korean government has asked for extra protection measures for the building and for the case to be investigated promptly. Korea's latest satellite is now successfully orbiting the Earth. Officials say the satellite made its first contact with Korea's ground station a few hours after it was launched. The new satellite will enable 24-hour monitoring of the Earth's surface regardless of the weather conditions. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
The Korea Aerospace Research Institute confirmed that the Korea Multipurpose Satellite 3A established radio contact with Korea's ground station Thursday afternoon. It made 2 previous radio communications and all of its solar panels have been deployed to generate power. The satellite, also known as Arirang 3A, was launched just past 7 a.m. Korea time from Russia's Yasny launch base. It was sent into space on the Dnepr, a Russian launch vehicle converted from a Soviet-era intercontinental ballistic missile. The launch comes as Korea is aiming to make inroads into the global space industry. Satellite development around the world is ramping up, and Korea plans to develop its own launch vehicle for testing by 2019. Korean officials hope the Arirang 3A will boost the country's ability to monitor the Earth's surface and complement the nation's 3 other multi-purpose satellites currently in space.
Until now, satellite development was led by the government, but this time private companies put a lot of effort into the making of the Arirang 3. We see this as a big opportunity for Korea to develop further in this area.
The 1,100-ton satellite has the most powerful optical lens of any Korean satellite yet. It will be able to provide clear images of any object larger than 50 centimeters in diameter on the Earth's surface. It's also equipped with an infrared sensor that can monitor volcanic movements or forest fires. The Arirang 3A will circle the Earth 15 times a day for the next 4 years. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now back here on Earth, President Park Geunhye has sanctioned a controversial anti-corruption bill. With the president's approval, the law will be proclaimed on Friday and enforced starting September 2016 after an 18-month grace period. Under this bill, public servants, members of the media and private education workers will face criminal punishment if they or their spouses are found to have accepted $900 or more in money or gifts from a person, regardless of whether it was in exchange for favours or if it was work-related. Now, critics of the bill say it could violate a person's constitutional rights and infringe on the freedom of the press and rights to equality. It appears the government's aggressive stimulus measures and central bank rate cuts are not bearing fruit just yet. Korea's consumer confidence continues to remain sluggish, with no signs that inflation will meet the central bank's target zone. Park Geunhye has the details.
Korean consumers' inflation expectations for the next 1 year came in at a record low of 2.5%. It also marked a 0.1 percentage point drop from a month ago, as policymakers see expected inflation as a window into future inflation. Forecasts are growing that the central bank is going to fall short of its inflation target band of 2.5% to 3.5%. The slumping expectations for prices to increase come after the central bank cut its key rate 3 times over the last 8 months as a means to prop up ailing domestic consumption and revitalize the economy. And despite such efforts, there are no signs of improving consumer sentiment either. Consumer sentiment has been on an upward trend this year, but that came to an early end in March. The Bank of Korea's Consumer Sentiment Index came in at 101 this month, down 2 points from February. The central bank attributes the drop to the sluggish pace of recovery and the weakening prospects of income from interest due to the record low key rate of 1.75%. A reading above 100 means optimists outnumber pessimists. 황지혜, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's free trade deal with the European Union has vastly improved the economic bloc's trade balance with Korea. An EU report shows that its exports to Korea jumped by 35%, entering the 3rd year of the FTA compared to the year before the deal took effect. Over the same period, Korea's exports to the EU basically remained the same. As a result, the EU's trade balance with Korea flipped from an $8.2 billion deficit pre-FTA to a $3.8 billion surplus. The Korea-EU Free Trade Agreement went into effect in July 2011. Now, shifting gears quite a bit now, and it's East meets West at the National Changguk Company of Korea. The traditional Korean opera company is staging a classic German play as its first performance of the year. Im Yoon-hee has the story.
There is no love like a mother's love. Even though this mother adopted this abandoned child, can she still love him like her own? The tender motherly voice that cries for him is real. The tears that she sheds for her child are real as well. But with one arm in the birth mother's hand and the other arm in the adoptive mother's hand, what determines a true mother's love? The Caucasian Chalk Circle is a German play written by Bertolt Brecht. It's a play about a mother's love. But it also echoes an age-old parable with lessons that Korean-Japanese director Chung Eui-shin, along with the National Changguk Company of Korea, aims to share, in the form of Korea's traditional pansori.
Pansori is a unique form of music. I have experience with operas and plays, which are different. And although this is my first time with pansori, I realized that the movement and voice had to be in rhythm. This piece by Brecht has meaningful content about the war, and interestingly, it melts perfectly into pansori form. There's a lot of emotional capacity to pansori, and a chance to show a truly sorrowful voice.
But the addition of pansori to this performance also means a special stage. There are 3 angles to the stage, drawing the audience into the performers and their performance, an intimate setting familiar to pansori. Another element of pansori also carried over is the presence of a lead singer, who acts as a narrator throughout the story. In this version of the Caucasian chalk circle, the role has been given to the judge, a figure who continually communicates with other actors and the audience, a traditional yet modern approach to this performance. The music is live, making use of an array of different instruments from all different cultures. The result is a clash of sounds, but at the same time, the sounds work together, leading to heightened emotions.
The instruments you'll see here are instruments from a band, like a guitar, bass, piano, but there are also classical music instruments, 국악 instruments like kayagums, and even electronic instruments involved. The purpose of mixing all these sounds is to appeal to the modern generation, but also to create the needed tension on the stage. However, in the center of it all, the voice of pansori will be heard loud and clear.
A mother's love is supposed to be the most unconditional, sacrificial type of love found in humanity. But who decides who that mother is? This circular ring, within this chalk circle, will determine a mother's true love. Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following this Friday morning from Seoul. For that, we connect to Eunice Kim at the News Center. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning to you, Mark. More confusion this morning on the mysterious crash of Germanwings Flight 9525. France's lead prosecutor has said sound retrieved from the plane's cockpit recorder pointed to the co-pilot's deliberate intent to drive the aircraft into the Alps.
The most plausible, realistic interpretation, as far as we are concerned, is that the co-pilot, through voluntary abstention, refused to open the door of the cabin for the captain, and then pressed a button which caused the aircraft to lose altitude.
Mr. Robin confirmed earlier reports saying the more experienced pilot was locked out of the cockpit just before the plane's final descent. He said the passengers likely were unaware of the impending danger until the last moments of the rapid 8-minute descent, when screams are heard in that audio recording. The French prosecutor added the co-pilot did not have any known ties to terrorism or extremists. Lufthansa, the parent company of Germanwings, has since identified the 28-year-old German co-pilot as Andreas Lubitz. Police in Germany have searched his home for clues. There was no intent offered in Tuesday's plane crash that killed all 150 people on board. Head of Lufthansa said Lubitz had taken a break from training for several months 6 years ago and was reinstated after his suitability was reestablished. Meanwhile, recovery operations continue in search of bodies and the second black box, the flight data recorder. It's official. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been confirmed to address both houses of the U.S. Congress when he visits Washington next month. U.S. Speaker John Boehner announced the invitation and said Abe's speech will give Americans an opportunity to hear ways to expand economic and security cooperation from a close ally. Prime Minister Abe would be the first Japanese leader to be given the relatively rare platform. He is also set to attend a formal state dinner at the White House on April 28th. Abe will be the third foreign leader to address Congress this year, following Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Afghan President Ashraf Ghani earlier this month. Finally, civilians in Yemen were seen picking up the pieces and surveying the damage when dawn broke following a surprise nighttime air assault led by Saudi Arabia and its allies. Reports say at least 18 civilians, including 6 children, were killed in that military operation that was to target Houthi rebels believed to be backed by Iran. Rebel leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi, in a televised speech, called the campaign criminal, unjust, brutal, and sinful, and promised to fight back. Iran has also denounced it, saying it considers this a dangerous step.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with the 2015 KBO League, which is set for its opening day tomorrow. And if you haven't noticed, the KBO is now being called the KBO League. And of course, some of the other changes in the league include the addition of a 10th KBO League team, making it the first time that the league will see 10 teams. And with the addition of another team comes the addition of games, as the number of games this season will increase from 128 to 144. And of course, once the first pitch is thrown out, the big question remains, will these Samsung Lions win their 5th straight championship, or will the 9 other teams stop that from happening? Now, before we can check out the opening weekend of the 2015 KBO League season, the other big match set for later tonight is the Korea-Uzbekistan match, as the national football team is set for a repeat of the 2015 Asian Cup quarterfinals. Now, Korea, who defeated Uzbekistan during the Asian Cup quarterfinals, will go into the match with a record of 9 wins, 2 draws, and just a single loss against their opponents. But with manager Uli Stilke choosing a couple of new faces in Lee Jae-sung and Kim Eun-sun, the big question is, are they up for the challenge? As the 61-year-old head coach is expected to try out different strategies during the match. Meanwhile, the match will kick off at the Daejeon World Cup Stadium at 8 p.m. Now, one of the biggest controversy here in Korea was the doping scandal of Park Tae-hwan, which led to the former Olympic champion getting slapped with an 18-month ban by FINA. But throughout this whole time, we haven't heard what he had to say regarding the issue. Well, that's all going to change now, as he's set to have a press conference later today at 3 p.m. to talk about his side of the story. And with the chief of Korean Swimming Federation, Lee Gi-heung, stating earlier that he should apologize first, the Marine boy's apology is expected at the presser as well. The 26-year-old is still being considered for a 3-year ban by the Korean Olympic Committee, although it's expected that he will receive a more lenient punishment. Well, a big game in the round of 4 KBO playoff series between the defending champions Ulsan Mobis Phoebus and the Changwon LG Sakers tipped off last night, as the two teams went into a must-win Game 5 in Ulsan. Now, in the first quarter, LG, looking for the big upset here, capitalized on Mobis' early turnovers as they take a slim 18-17 lead. But in the second quarter, Mobis shuts down the LG offense, outscoring their opponents 18-8 to take a 35-26 lead going into halftime. And despite Kim Si-dae's game-high 22 points, Mobis never looks back in this game as they take Game 5 78-67 as they make their 3rd straight trip to the championship series and a record 9th overall. And speaking of championship series, the V-League is all set for an exciting championship series themselves, as 4 teams seek the title as the V-League champions. Now, first off, over in the Women's Championship Series, which begins later tonight, will be between the 2012-2013 champions IBK Altos, who will square off against the Korea Expressway team, who seek their first championship title in a best-of-5 series. And while that matchup can go either way, the 8-time champions Samsung Hwajae Bluefangs in the men's league are the heavy favorites going into the championship series against OK Savings Bank, as Robert Landy Simone looked to pull off a huge upset against his Cuban rival, Leo Martinez. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Spring is in the air. Spring flowers started to bloom in the capital area. Despite the dryness, we have clean air to breathe in and sun is shining down. It's very pleasant to be outside in the afternoon these days, and we'll continue to enjoy those beautiful conditions on this last Friday of March. In fact, it will be even milder today. The high in Seoul will climb up to upper teens, and the southern provinces will see highs getting up to 20s. But be sure to have extra sweater or cardigan cardigan with you. It feels quite chilly when there's no sun out. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul is kicking off at 4, but later on will peak at 17, and Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 21 and 20, while Busan tops out at 16. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 16 and 18, and Dokdo makes it to 16. Well, that's all for the weather. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Jiyeon, for the weather. And those are the stories we've been following on this Friday morning in Seoul. Stay tuned for Korea Today. That's coming up at the top of the hour. Have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.